Hi guys, welcome to part, let's see, one, two, three, four, part four, I think, of our timeline study on the prophecies. The first one we did was looking at the calendar in general, the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, so we can learn how to set dates. We learned what this year is, what year this year is, and for this is 2024, so what year it is on the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. Then in the second one, we looked at two prophecies that specifically give us 32 AD for the death of the Messiah. There's actually a third we didn't get to, but it's in the books. And then the next one we did was looking at 1948, and we used the same calendar system as Daniel did in chapter 9 in chapter 5. And now we're going to look at another prophecy in Daniel, giving us the date of 1967 when something was supposed to happen. So very, very important. So let's go ahead and get started on this. So this is our timeline study. We're going to set the date of something, some prophecy to occur in 1967. Many times prophecies will give us an event and they'll be greatly detailed, but we don't know when. In a lot of these things, we have a date given, and sometimes, most of the time, we don't know exactly what it is that happens on that date, but just something. So this is 1967. So the text we're going to be using is Daniel chapter 5. Now what we saw is in Daniel 9, it was a fairly clear from a decree, so many days, Messiah is cut off. In Daniel 5, we saw that Nebuchadnezzar went insane for 7 years, and at the end of which got his kingdom back, and we saw that Cyrus gave the Jews permission to go home, start up there by decree, made them a nation again. We connected those two and had the timeline of the 7 years, 7 weeks of years, basically the 360 code that we do with these prophecies in Daniel. And we saw that it came out to where Cyrus decreed they would be a nation in 537 BC, and they became a nation by decree the second time in AD 1948. So now we're going to look at when they're supposed to build the temple, but are stopped for some reason, a decree to build the temple. So this is in Daniel chapter 5. Again, it's very cryptic, so we have to dig it out of there. So this is the handwriting on the wall. This is a very famous one. And most people get half the prophecy, but forget the rest of it. So let's read this. This is Daniel 5, 25 to 28. And then we'll also look at verse 31. But it says, remember what had happened. There was Cyrus was outside trying to break in. They decided that nobody could ever break into Babylon, so they're going to ignore him. And they had a party. And they brought the Lord's temple vessels out and used them for the party. And this large hand appeared and started writing on the wall, scared everybody to death. So they called Daniel to interpret it. And so this is his interpretation. It says, this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, upharsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Now, this is what's called a quad word prophecy. It's when you have 4 words and you put all 4 words together, it means one thing. And if you look at 3 of the 4 words, usually something is doubled. It actually spells out something or somehow means a secondary prophecy. So one is a prophecy for right then and there when the prophecy was given. The other one is a long-ranged, usually a timeline prophecy. So notice what he said. It's 4 words. Mene is twice. Mene, mene, tekel, and upharsin. So this is the interpretation for the king at that time. Mene, God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Mene means to number something, okay? If you're using it as a word or as a verb, it means to number, okay? Tekel, you were weighed in the balances and found wanting. It means to weigh or judge something, is tekel. And then a peres, when you say upharsin, it means you is and. So it's actually saying mene, mene, tekel, and pharsin is plural for peres. So there is a peres, and we'll get to that. But peres means your kingdom is divided. It actually means divided as a word, as a verb. So your kingdom will be divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. So that's what the prophecy means. You're done. And it says that that very night he was killed and Darius took the kingdom. Well, that's what it says here. 531. And Darius the Mede took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So that helps us figure out exactly when it occurred. But so this is interesting. So for the person, we look at these 4 words as verbs, and they're 4 letters. So we look at the 3 actually. So mene means you're numbered, you're judged, and your kingdom will be divided. So number, judge, divided. But let's look at this a little deeper. It actually has another word. You can look at a word as a verb and as a noun. And so if I use the word bear and it's a noun, it means a large creature that is dangerous, like a grizzly bear. If I use it as a noun, as a verb rather, I can't bear something, which means I'm having a problem and I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to walk away or attack or something. Can't bear a situation. So 2 totally different meanings, whether it's a noun or a verb. So let's look at this. Again, if it's a verb, which is what Daniel is interpreting, giving it to him, mene means to number, and why it's doubled doesn't really, there's no explanation because it doesn't apply to him. He's numbered and judged or weighed and divided. So his, looking at it that way, it's basically the present judgment on Belshazzar. Okay. Now, if you look at these as nouns, they're actually numbers. Like, for instance, if we have a dollar bill, there's a 50-cent piece, there's a dime, there's a nickel, and there's a penny. So if I said I had 2 dimes and a nickel and 1 quarter, you know, and you wanted to figure out how much sense is that? Well, you'd convert them all down to the penny and figure it out. It'd be 49 cents or whatever, but pieces of the coins. This is the same thing. A mina is 100 gerahs. A gerah is like a penny. It's a base unit. So 1,000, I said 100, but 1,000 gerahs. So you've got 2 of those, mene, tekel, and upharsin. So 1,000, and then there's a 2,000 gerahs. A tekel is the way they said shekel, and it means 20 gerahs. So kind of like a quarter, you know, almost a fifth of a dollar. And then a peres is 500 gerahs. So a peres is half of a mina. So if you, this is about a future judgment on Israel. So if you add these up, mene, tekel, upharsin, it's 2,520 days or units or pennies or something. It's the number 2520. For our purposes, it's the day per year calculation. So it's the 2,520 days or years when something happens. So again, just like we did in the last 2 videos, we find out the date that it's based on. You go forward and see what happens on that date. So let's do that. So Darius's decree, and this is the decree that the temple can be rebuilt, but then it stopped for a number of years. So that would be an interesting study to plug into here to figure out if the dates start right, do they end right? Anyway, so let's look at this. This is in Ezra chapter 6, all about Darius's decree. So Cyrus decreed the Jews could go home and build a temple. Darius made a decree for it also. And then there was a couple of different divisions and stuff like that. So this says, Darius the king made a decree, and a search was made for the house of rolls. So what's happened is Cyrus said, go do it. The people said, we don't want them to do it. So they stopped. It's like a riot. And so they came before Darius and said, well, Cyrus decreed we should build it. Darius is basically saying, I don't know anything about that. If I'll do a search, if there is a historical document where he really said that, it will be done. Otherwise, I ain't doing it, because it would cause an uproar of the population that's in the area of Israel. Nothing ever changes, does it? And, you know, so we don't want that. We're going to have a 2-state solution type thing. So, but if there's actually a decree, we're going to follow a decree. So he says he'll make a search in the house of rolls where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. And there was found at Alkma, the place that the providence of the Medes were, a roll or a scroll, and therein was a record written like this. In the first year of Cyrus the king, the same Cyrus being king, made a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be built, and the place where they offer sacrifices, so the entire Temple Mount needs to be, fixed and a temple built. And let the foundations thereof be strongly laid, and the height of thereof be 60 cubits, so basically like it was before, and the breadth thereof 60 cubits. So he goes on and begins to describe it. So we're not going to set up a dinky little shack. We're going to actually build it like it was. There's going to be the Temple Mount and a temple and a Jerusalem and a walls, and the Jews run it just like it used to be. So this is the decree to rebuild the temple. So at this point, the Jews are supposed to go back, and everybody recognizes that the Jews have the right to the Temple Mount. Now, they may or may not build the temple real quick, and this is where we get Haggai and Zechariah. They actually built their houses, and because of the populace in the area, decided not to build the temple at this point. We're going to do other things instead, and God got angry with them. But that's Haggai and Zechariah. So this is the decree. So he goes on and says, there will be 3 rows of great stones, a row of new timber. Let the expenses be given out of the king's house. So Persia is supposed to pay for the rebuilding of this temple. If you put that, this is totally side thing, but if you put that in today's language, Iran would pay for the building of the temple. I doubt that's going to happen, but it's kind of an interesting thought. It might mean something else. So let the golden and silver vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar took forth out of the temple in Jerusalem, be brought into Babylon, be restored, and brought again unto the temple which is Jerusalem, every one to his place, and place them in the house of God. So at this point, the Nebuchadnezzar, or Belshazzar actually, took the temples of God, used them, and there was the handwriting on the wall. Now we say, and you take those same vessels that have been stored up, you give them back to the Jews and let them build their temple. That's the decree. So that connects this decree with those vessels. So at this point, they were supposed to go back and build the temple. They took control of the Temple Mount, but they didn't necessarily build a temple yet. So now this decree with Darius, we're going to plug in that 2520 and see what happens. So using the same calculation of the 360 day per Jewish year prophecy code, I won't explain that because I have in the last couple of videos. So that comes out to 2520 years. Amini, Atikal, Upharsin, right? So that comes out to, if you take 2520 years at 360 days per year, actually is the same number as last time. It's 907,200 days. Okay, so it's the same math as last time. 907,200 days would be 2,483 years and 285 days on the Gregorian calendar, right? We've done this before, same thing. So if you add 2,483 years to Darius' decree, and again, that's supposed to be August 25th, 518 BC. Now, again, most places will say 517, 518, give or take, and nobody today has a document that I know of dating August 25th. The old ones talk about it, but there's no actual evidence. But as we'll see, that's pretty interesting if we just take their word for it. And again, I don't really care at this point if we just take the years, which are rock solid. We get to sometime in AD 32, Jesus dies. Sometime in 1948, Israel becomes a state. So now we're going to look sometime in 1967, something happens. But let's just plug in the supposed dates, okay? So this was supposed to be August 25th, 518 BC. So if you add that 2,483 years to it, that comes to August 25th, 1966. Now, you always add 1 year because you crossed, there's no 0 year on the calendar. We've done that before. So we add, adding that to that, 66, okay? So now August 25th, AD 1966, plus the 285 extra days runs us through the year and up to June, specifically June 7th, 1967. So what event occurred that is connected with the Temple Mount, the temple vessels, Israel being in control of the Temple Mount, despite the people surrounding the area not wanting them to control the Temple Mount and to build a temple and stuff like that? What happened in 1967? It was the end of the Six-Day War, the 1967 war. June 7th was the day they captured the Temple Mount. Now, this is very important in our next study of what may have happened, but specifically for us at this point, this shows that, again, cryptically in Daniel, we've seen AD 32, specifically April 6, 32 AD, you know, give or take a few days, but I'm saying right on that. We see that perfectly with the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, was the death of the Messiah. And after that started the Age of Grace. Then we saw specifically, it was supposed to be May 14th, 1948, that Israel became a nation. Now we're seeing specifically June 7th, 1967 is supposed to be when they take the Temple Mount. You would assume they'd go ahead and build a temple, but in Darius's time, they took control and everything, but they didn't because of problems. And I don't know how long it took them. We'd have to look it up and see. That'd be an interesting study too. But in AD 1967, June 7th, they took the Temple Mount. They still acknowledge their sovereignty over it. It's theirs. But because of the Muslims not wanting the Dome of the Rock to be disturbed, they allow them to do their thing. And they're not planning on, you know, deliberately yet moving it, building a temple or anything like that. It's everybody's thinking it'll happen someday, but right now politics are just the way it is. So the same event happened. So again, June 7th, 1967. So we'll go ahead and stop there for this study. So AD 32, 1948 AD, 1967 AD. So in the next study, we're going to look at another prophecy that should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2025, 26, 27. While I'm doing this in 2024, this is a future prophecy that has a date set with it. So that will be really interesting to look at. Okay, we'll go ahead and stop there for tonight. Thank you, guys.